They thought they understood war. They thought they understood survival. The galaxy's greatest empires had fought for millennia. Their fleets blotting out the stars, their weapons capable of reducing entire worlds to ash. They believed they had seen everything a species could offer in battle: cunning, strategy, sacrifice. But then they met us. Humans, to the Dominion, to the Arathi, to the countless alien civilizations that looked upon us with contempt. We were primitive animals barely capable of holding our own on a single planet, fragile, unremarkable, predictable. But they made one mistake, one critical miscalculation that would echo across the stars for centuries to come. They underestimated human stubbornness. Stubbornness, the trait they dismissed as irrational, foolish, even self-destructive, was the blade we sharpened against them. While other species bowed to logic, retreating when the odds turned against them, humanity refused. While empires measured battles in cost and gain, humans measured them in defiance. It began with the siege of Jericho Station, a backwater outpost no Dominion strategist considered worth defending. The humans stationed there were outnumbered 100 to 1, their supply lines cut, their reinforcements weeks away. The Dominion expected surrender within hours, but the humans dug in. They fortified every corridor, every ventilation shaft, every bulkhead. When the Dominion demanded their surrender, the humans responded with laughter. "You'll have to dig us out," they said, "and you'll bleed for every inch." And bleed the Dominion did. For 2 weeks, the station held against impossible odds. Ammunition ran dry, food supplies dwindled, and yet the defenders refused to yield. They improvised weapons from pipes and fuel cells. They turned broken machinery into mines. When the Dominion finally breached the command center, they found the last survivors still standing, bloodied and broken but smiling, their hands clutching the detonators that would deny the enemy their victory. The explosion consumed the station, erasing both humans and invaders in one final act of defiance. The Dominion reported victory, but their soldiers whispered of madness. They whispered of humans who fought when there was no point, who smiled when they should have wept, who turned stubbornness into a weapon sharper than any blade. From that day, a legend was born, and Jericho Station was only the beginning. Across every battlefield, the same pattern emerged. Human colonies refused to surrender, even after their cities burned. Human soldiers fought long after their bodies should have collapsed. Human civilians joined the fight with nothing but kitchen knives and sharpened tools. Standing side by side with soldiers in hopeless battles, they had no chance of winning. To the galaxy, this was madness. To us it was instinct, because human stubbornness was not just refusal, it was creation. Out of hopelessness we forged opportunity. Out of ruin we built resistance. Out of certain death we carved victory. One Dominion commander, baffled by the unrelenting defiance, wrote in his final report, "We broke their bones. We shattered their weapons. We burned their homes. But still they stood. Still they fought. And when they fell, they dragged us down with them." How do you defeat a species that refuses to admit it has already lost? The answer, whispered across the galaxy, was simple. You do not. That was the weapon no one saw coming. Not our technology, not our tactics, but our refusal to yield. Our unbreakable stubbornness. And as the war stretched on, that weapon would terrify the galaxy more than any fleet ever could. The galaxy expected Jericho Station to be an anomaly, a tragic outburst from a primitive species cornered and desperate. Surely no people could sustain such defiance across a true war. Logic dictated that humans would break eventually. But logic was wrong. On Karthos III, when Dominion forces descended upon the capital city, they expected a quick and decisive occupation. Their fleets reduced the skies to fire, their soldiers stormed the streets, and yet the humans did not run. They dragged overturned vehicles into barricades, funneled enemy troops into alleys where Molotov fires consumed them, and turned skyscrapers into sniper towers. For 3 months, the city resisted. 3 months of relentless assaults, of block-by-block battles, of civilians standing shoulder to shoulder with soldiers. When the Dominion finally raised their banner over the ruins, they discovered that half their forces had been annihilated. For a single city, The Dominion commander cursed humanity as irrational animals who fight for rubble. But among his soldiers, the whispers grew louder. "If they fight like this for one city," they muttered, "what will they do for their homeworld?" And Karthos III was not alone. On the frozen mining colony of Rhynar, the humans refused evacuation when the Dominion fleet approached. Instead, they tunneled into the ice, creating a labyrinth of traps. The invaders chased them into the tunnels, only to find themselves hunted in the dark by shadows that struck and vanished. The war dragged on until the Dominion withdrew, leaving behind hundreds of frozen corpses buried in the snow. The galaxy began to take notice. Reports flooded in from every front, painting the same picture: humans who refused to surrender even when all logic demanded it. Humans who fought battles already lost. Humans who turned hopelessness into their sharpest weapon. The alien strategists tried to explain it. They called it psychological instability. They called it barbarism. Some even claimed humans possessed a death wish, an evolutionary flaw driving them to fight until extinction. But the soldiers who faced them knew better. They had seen the look in human eyes, that fire that did not dim even when their bodies were broken. They had seen mothers clutching children with one arm and a rifle with the other. They had seen soldiers bleeding out, still crawling toward the enemy with a grenade clutched in their hand. They realized what their leaders could not. This was not weakness. This was not madness. This was strength, because human stubbornness meant that even in defeat, humanity inflicted wounds that no empire could sustain. Every world burned was a scar that bled the Dominion dry. Every victory cost them more than they could afford. And slowly, ever so slowly, the tide began to shift. Other species began to notice too. The oppressed, the enslaved, the silenced. They watched the humans fight with a defiance that shook the stars, and they began to whisper, "If the humans can resist the Dominion, why not us?" And rebellion sparked. Small at first, scattered uprisings that were crushed swiftly, but they kept coming. Fueled by the same stubborn refusal to bow, they spread across the galaxy. The Dominion could not understand it. Their fleets were still larger, their armies still stronger, their technology still superior. Yet their empire was unraveling, not because humanity destroyed them outright, but because humanity refused to acknowledge defeat, one by one. The galaxy's empires began to learn a truth they had long ignored: that the will to fight, the refusal to surrender, could be more powerful than any weapon forged in steel. Human stubbornness was not just a trait. It was contagion, and it was spreading. The Dominion's generals convened in their orbiting citadel, a gleaming fortress carved from a dying asteroid. Screens displayed every front where humans resisted, every colony where stubbornness had cost them thousands of lives. They were losing control, not because humans had superior weapons or tactics, but because humans refused to stop fighting. Admiral Krevlar slammed his clawed hand against the table. "It makes no sense. Every report defies logic. They should have fallen months ago." "Sir," muttered a junior strategist, her scales shimmering in the dim light, "perhaps that is exactly why they have not fallen. They do not play by rules we understand. They do not value the same things. They persist," Krevlar growled. "Persist? Persisting does not stop our fleets from annihilating them. Persisting does not prevent our weapons from carving their cities into ash." The strategist hesitated and then spoke again. "It is not about weapons, Admiral. It is about their refusal to die. Even when faced with certain death, they keep fighting. Every engagement we win, they find a way to endure. And every engagement we win costs us more than it should." Krevlar's eyes narrowed. He had seen stubborn soldiers before, on border skirmishes with minor species. But humans were unlike anything in the galaxy. They did not run. They did not negotiate. They did not surrender. At the mining colony of Rhynar, survivors emerged from the frozen labyrinths, frostbitten and exhausted, but victorious. Their enemy's strategy had been flawless on paper, and yet the humans had turned the ice into a weapon. One human had even rigged explosives to collapse tunnels while carrying his injured comrades to safety, leaving a trail of Dominion casualties behind. Reports from Karthos III were even more unsettling. Entire units had been wiped out, yet civilians had taken up arms and continued fighting, improvising traps and ambushes, refusing to let the enemy advance. Humans did not wait for reinforcements. They created them from whatever scraps and survivors they could find. Across the galaxy, Dominion soldiers whispered in fear. How do they do it? They asked each other. Why do they not flee? Why do they not surrender? Among the humans themselves, no one called it bravery or heroism. They simply called it survival. Every individual believed that giving up meant death, but fighting, even against impossible odds, meant a chance. And humans were experts at taking chances that no other species dared. This stubbornness, this refusal to accept the inevitable, had begun to terrify the Dominion's top strategists. Their simulations had predicted swift victories. Their weapons were designed to annihilate entire worlds. Yet humans had endured, and with every survival, they grew bolder. In one infamous battle on the volcanic planet of Tharex, the Dominion dropped the planet's surface into molten chaos, hoping to incinerate a human stronghold. When the smoke cleared, the humans were still alive, having evacuated through an intricate network of tunnels. They had repurposed the lava flows to destroy their pursuers, leaving the Dominion soldiers trapped and screaming amidst rivers of molten rock. News of Tharex spread like wildfire across the Dominion's territories. Humans were no longer just a threat. They were a puzzle that defied comprehension. The galaxy's most powerful species had never encountered a foe who not only refused to die, but turned every attempt to annihilate them into a trap. On board the Dominion flagship, Admiral Krevlar paced endlessly. We cannot win by numbers. We cannot win by firepower. Every approach fails. What are we missing? A veteran commander, whose tentacles twitched nervously, answered. We are missing that humans do not value survival the way we do. Survival is not a calculation for them. Their stubbornness, their refusal to surrender, is a weapon more potent than our fleets. Krevlar's mandibles clicked in frustration. A weapon. It is a concept I cannot compute. Weapons have measurable strength. They have limitations. Stubbornness is chaos. Exactly, sir, the commander replied. It is chaos incarnate, and chaos is impossible to predict. Meanwhile, across dozens of human colonies, the very chaos that terrified the Dominion was orchestrated in a strangely methodical way. Humans leveraged improvisation, teamwork, and sheer willpower. Even when facing advanced technology and overwhelming numbers, they adapted. Every trap, every ambush, every last stand seemed reckless, but it was always calculated enough to create maximum disruption. The Dominion's own soldiers began recording the patterns. They analyzed human stubbornness, trying to anticipate the next move. Every tactic failed. Every assault backfired. Humans transformed desperation into ingenuity, and ingenuity into victory. Even when humans suffered losses that would have ended other species, they learned from them. A failed ambush did not demoralize them. It fueled the next one. Every mistake became a lesson. Every loss a blueprint for future resistance. They were relentless, resilient, and, most importantly, refusing to acknowledge defeat. Stories of human persistence reached the outer systems where the Dominion's generals feared rebellion. Formerly subjugated worlds whispered of a species that would not bow, that would fight until the last breath. If humans could endure, perhaps they could teach others to endure too. And the thought alone terrified the Dominion far more than any army ever could. It became clear that the humans' greatest weapon was not steel, firepower, or advanced technology. It was their will, their unyielding refusal to surrender. And as the Dominion reevaluated their strategies, the realization sank in. Humans were not just fighters, they were living chaos. A force that could not be predicted, contained, or destroyed. And for the first time in history, the galaxy began to question whether any empire, no matter how vast or powerful, could truly conquer a species that refused to bow. As the weeks passed, human victories were no longer isolated incidents. They became a contagious force, spreading fear and uncertainty across the Dominion's territories. Reports of small human squads defying entire battalions reached the highest echelons of power. A single team, armed with scavenged weapons and improvised armor, could hold an entire city for days, turning narrow streets into deadly choke points. Every time a Dominion fleet advanced, they discovered traps they had never imagined, ambushes that turned predictable tactics into catastrophes. The Dominion's intelligence networks were baffled. Analysts tried to categorize the humans to reduce their chaos into a formula. Every effort failed. Humans could not be predicted because they did not act according to logic the Dominion understood. While other species calculated risks and losses, humans acted on instinct, emotion, and sheer willpower. Their stubbornness was not blind, it was adaptive, clever, and terrifyingly effective. On the jungle world of Viralia, a human colony was surrounded. The Dominion dropped aerial bombardments and cut off supply lines, expecting the humans to surrender within days. Instead, humans used the thick canopy to vanish from sight, emerging at night to sabotage enemy encampments. They rigged the forest itself into a weapon, poisonous plants, hidden pits, and explosive traps. Every attempt by Dominion forces to flush them out ended in chaos and casualties. A Dominion general reported back, shaking his tentacles in disbelief. "Sir, it is impossible. Every plan fails. Every advance is punished. They are not just surviving, they are turning our strength against us." Across the galaxy, the psychological impact was profound. Soldiers who had never seen humans in person began to fear their reputation alone. Stories of human stubbornness circulated through training camps, of entire squads surviving impossible ambushes, of civilians defending towns with nothing more than courage and rudimentary weapons, of humans refusing to abandon their homes even when death seemed certain. In the Dominion High Council, panic began to replace arrogance. Strategists argued heatedly over what could be done. Some called for overwhelming force to annihilate every human settlement and erase them from existence. Others warned that more destruction only made humans adapt faster, turning every failed attack into a lesson. Chaos, it seemed, only empowered them. Meanwhile, humans themselves remained surprisingly unremarkable in their demeanor. They did not boast of victories. They did not celebrate with grandiose speeches. They simply endured, repaired, regrouped, and prepared for the next attack. Their stubbornness was not performative. It was natural, ingrained in every action and every choice. Colonies that were thought to be lost returned stronger than before. Survivors from one settlement would join another, sharing strategies learned from failure. A failed ambush in one system became a masterclass for the next human group in another. They learned faster than any Dominion simulator could predict. Every disaster became a stepping stone, every setback a lesson in survival. This adaptability unnerved the Dominion at every level. Admirals, generals, and intelligence officers could not understand how humans consistently turned disadvantages into advantages. They had studied countless species in their conquest across the stars, yet no other had combined resilience, creativity, and sheer stubbornness so effectively. Even civilians became unexpected warriors. Children learned to move silently through urban ruins. Elders taught guerrilla tactics based on instinct and experience, and entire populations coordinated without centralized commands. Dominion forces began to report instances where humans seemed to anticipate attacks before they happened, appearing almost prescient in their resistance. The Dominion attempted psychological warfare, thinking that fear could break them. Broadcasts warned humans of annihilation, claiming that surrender was their only option. Yet humans, instead of panicking, turned these warnings into motivation. Propaganda from the enemy became a rallying cry. Every threat fueled their stubborn determination to fight, survive, and overcome. On the icy world of Jarnath, a Dominion fleet landed expecting minimal resistance. Instead, humans constructed an intricate network of ice tunnels and camouflage that rendered conventional attacks useless. Dominion troops fell into traps, their advanced scanners fooled by mirrors and ice reflections. One soldier reported, "It is as if they are everywhere and nowhere. Every step forward is met with chaos. It is maddening." The human stubbornness had become a strategic weapon. Dominion fleets, which once relied on overwhelming technology and firepower, now faced uncertainty at every turn. Every engagement had to be reconsidered. Every strategy was second-guessed. The humans' refusal to surrender or flee forced the Dominion to expend resources they had never anticipated. Even in diplomacy, humans demonstrated their indomitable will. Attempts to negotiate peace or capitulation were met with flat refusals. Their leadership, while modest, maintained a simple principle. Survival was non-negotiable, and surrender was never an option. No bribes, no threats, no overwhelming force could alter this stubborn resolve. Across the Dominion's galaxy, whispers spread among soldiers. Humans are chaos incarnate. They were unpredictable, relentless, and unnervingly resilient. Every victory the Dominion claimed only fueled more human resistance. Every attack only reinforced the notion that humans did not operate under conventional rules. The more the Dominion tried to control them, the more humans adapted. And with every adaptation, humans grew bolder. Strategic positions once deemed invincible were taken with ingenuity and courage, proving again and again that their stubbornness was not mere obstinacy. It was a weapon that transformed desperation into power. As Admiral Krevlar stared at the reports piling up on his desk, he realized a terrifying truth. It was not their fleets, their weapons, or even their tactics that made humans dangerous. It was their unwillingness to surrender, their chaos, their unpredictability, their refusal to accept death as inevitable. This was what made them a threat that no empire, no matter how vast, had ever faced before. Humans were not merely surviving. They were redefining the very rules of engagement. And the Dominion, for all its logic and power, was beginning to understand that some weapons could not be countered with technology alone. The tide was shifting. No longer were humans merely defending. Now they were taking the fight to the Dominion in ways that few could have imagined. Intelligence reports began describing coordinated strikes that spanned multiple systems, demonstrating a level of planning that rivaled entire Dominion operations. Humans, seemingly fueled by an unshakable stubbornness, had begun turning their defensive resilience into calculated aggression. On the barren world of Krathos, Dominion forces established a forward base, convinced that the planet's harsh environment would break the humans' resolve. They were wrong. Humans, despite facing freezing temperatures, scarce resources, and overwhelming enemy numbers, infiltrated the base under the cover of blizzards and darkness. Using minimal technology and maximum improvisation, they disabled key systems, sabotaged supply chains, and vanished before the Dominion could respond. By dawn, the base was in chaos, and Dominion commanders were left scrambling to comprehend how a seemingly outmatched species had struck so decisively. News of these human offensives spread quickly through Dominion ranks. Soldiers whispered tales of human squads holding entire garrisons hostage, of civilians turning abandoned cities into fortresses, and of entire battalions being forced to retreat due to relentless guerrilla tactics. Every skirmish, no matter how small, became a lesson in the dangers of underestimating human stubbornness. Admiral Krevlar, who had once dismissed humans as unpredictable but ultimately weak, now faced a crisis of credibility. He convened emergency councils demanding explanations for repeated failures. His advisors could only provide fragmented reports, each more baffling than the last. "Admiral, they anticipate our moves, and yet they improvise faster than our simulations can predict," one strategist admitted, shaking his appendages in frustration. Humans had begun using the Dominion's own strategies against them. They learned from prior defeats, studying every battle, every error, every vulnerability. If a Dominion fleet relied on precision strikes, humans lured them into ambushes. If the Dominion attempted to overwhelm with sheer numbers, humans turned the terrain, weather, or environment into allies. It was not brute strength that made humans dangerous. It was their relentless adaptability combined with an almost pathological refusal to surrender. In one remarkable incident, a human fleet confronted a Dominion cruiser in open space, a vessel twice their size and armed with superior weapons. Instead of engaging head-on, humans deployed decoys, creating the illusion of a much larger force. Dominion sensors misread the situation, triggering defensive maneuvers that fragmented their formation. Using the confusion, humans executed precise strikes, crippling the cruiser without losing a single ship. Dominion reports labeled it as unthinkable, and the story became legend among humans themselves. The psychological impact on Dominion troops was profound. Fear was no longer about imminent death. It was about facing an enemy that refused the basic laws of survival they had come to rely upon. The human stubbornness had become contagious, infecting morale across entire fleets. Rumors circulated of soldiers refusing to advance simply because they could not predict how humans would react, fearing traps, improvisations, and audacious counterattacks. On the world of Sarith, human resistance took a new form, coordinated uprisings within Dominion-occupied cities. Civilians and insurgents collaborated, using sabotage, misinformation, and tactical ingenuity to dismantle control from within. Dominion leaders were stunned. They had assumed humans would be compliant once occupation forces arrived, but instead, humans turned the city into a web of chaos that no amount of technology could fully control. Even the Dominion's elite forces began reporting psychological phenomena. Humans exhibited fearlessness bordering on recklessness, yet it was not random, it was calculated. Individuals knowingly faced overwhelming odds, not for glory, but because surrender was never an option. Dominion analysts attempted to model this behavior, but their algorithms failed to capture the depth of human determination. They were stubborn beyond reason, chaotic beyond prediction, and relentless beyond comprehension. In the council chambers of the Dominion High Command, panic began to spread. Admiral Krevler, usually calm and composed, slammed his clawed hand against the table. "We cannot hold them with conventional tactics," he barked. "Every assault is met with adaptability we cannot counter. Every planet we think secured becomes another disaster. This stubbornness is their greatest weapon." One advisor, voice trembling, suggested a radical approach: total annihilation, a scorched galaxy strategy to ensure humans could no longer resist. Krevler hesitated. He knew that such an approach could destroy valuable systems, alienate allies, and potentially awaken other civilizations who might intervene. Yet the humans' continued victories left him with little choice. Conventional methods had failed, and the stubbornness of this species was reshaping the entire galactic balance. Meanwhile, humans themselves remained unshaken. In their camps, settlements, and battlefields, they trained, coordinated, and endured. Stories of survival became stories of strategy. Stories of resistance became stories of triumph. Children learned from elders how to adapt and improvise, how to anticipate and counter, how to remain unwavering when all odds suggested defeat. Their stubbornness was not a mere quirk, it was a philosophy, a fundamental aspect of their identity. Across space, Dominion commanders began questioning everything they thought they knew. The stubbornness of humans defied logic, reason, and expectation. Every failed assault forced them to reconsider strategy, yet no adjustment could fully account for the unpredictable ingenuity of a species unwilling to bow. Human resistance was no longer a problem to be solved. It was a phenomenon to be feared, studied, and if possible, destroyed before it became unstoppable. As fleets repositioned and Dominion resources stretched thin, humans launched yet another offensive. Not one of desperation, but one of calculated defiance. Planets long assumed to be safe under Dominion control were liberated through precise strikes, coordinated uprisings, and relentless courage. Each victory, large or small, reinforced the terrifying truth. Human stubbornness was not a flaw. It was a weapon capable of turning entire galaxies upside down. And so, the Dominion, once confident in its dominion over countless worlds, faced a species that refused to surrender, refused to fear, and refused to die quietly. Humans were not just surviving. They were rewriting the rules of warfare, endurance, and resistance. Their stubbornness had become legend, their courage a nightmare for every Dominion strategist, and their willpower an unstoppable force that no empire had yet encountered. Victory, however, was never simple for humans. Each conquest carried with it immense costs, not only in lives but in resources, morale, and the unending mental strain of outsmarting an opponent that seemed to anticipate every move. Yet humans thrived in adversity. Their stubbornness was not mindless aggression. It was methodical, deliberate, and deeply ingrained in the way they approached every challenge. Every setback became a lesson, every narrow escape became strategy, and every Dominion failure became inspiration for the next assault. Across liberated planets, humans began consolidating their victories. Where once there had been scattered resistance cells, there were now organized militias, logistical networks, and even rudimentary governance. Leaders emerged from the chaos, not from birthright or appointment, but from sheer competence, bravery, and the ability to inspire others to never give up. These leaders embodied the stubbornness that defined their people, ensuring that no victory would be wasted and no lesson forgotten. The Dominion, meanwhile, struggled to comprehend this evolving human resistance. Fleets were rerouted, colonies reinforced, and entire divisions restructured. Yet the humans adapted faster than the Dominion could react. Intelligence networks, once considered the backbone of their military supremacy, failed to predict the humans' ingenuity. It was as if the stubbornness itself was contagious, seeding chaos in the minds of the Dominion commanders, disrupting their confidence, and leaving them perpetually one step behind. Stories of human tenacity began spreading not only among the Dominion ranks, but across neutral worlds. Traders, smugglers, and diplomats carried tales of humans who would fight in impossible conditions, defy overwhelming odds, and somehow emerge victorious. Their reputation as a species that refused to surrender grew, and soon whispers of fear and respect reached even the farthest corners of the galaxy. The stubbornness that had once seemed a minor quirk was now seen as a fundamental threat, a weapon of psychological warfare more potent than any plasma cannon or orbital strike. On the front lines, human squads continued to perform feats that defied belief. In one campaign on the ice world of Vryn, a human unit of barely 100 faced a Dominion garrison of over 1,000. Conventional logic dictated total annihilation, yet the humans moved like shadows, using crevasses, blizzards, and frozen canyons to isolate small groups of the enemy, picking them off silently, sowing confusion, and ultimately forcing a surrender. When Dominion reports reached headquarters, commanders could only repeat the same phrase: unthinkable. How does a species so outnumbered continue to succeed? Back on liberated planets, humans focused on rebuilding and strengthening their hold. Supply chains were restored, shelters erected, and communication networks established. Every victory was carefully secured, not just for immediate survival, but to ensure that the stubbornness of the human spirit could continue to manifest in tangible power. Schools and training facilities emphasized ingenuity, endurance, and resilience, cultivating the next generation to inherit and expand upon the human legacy of relentless persistence. Even in moments of apparent despair, humans did not falter. Disease, famine, and the psychological trauma of constant conflict were met with the same indomitable resolve. Medical teams improvised treatments with whatever was available, engineers constructed defenses from salvaged materials, and strategists analyzed each encounter to extract lessons for future engagements. Where other species might have succumbed to exhaustion or hopelessness, humans converted adversity into opportunity, forging a society hardened by trials but strengthened in spirit. The Dominion, increasingly desperate, attempted psychological manipulation, propaganda, and intimidation. They broadcast messages claiming that human resistance was futile, that entire colonies would be destroyed if surrender was not immediate. Yet these tactics were ineffective. Humans, rather than bowing, often used such threats as motivation, channeling fear into determination and turning the Dominion's own strategies into tools of defiance. As humans continued to consolidate their victories, their stubbornness became a symbol. Across systems, neutral civilizations observed the human campaigns with fascination and caution. What had begun as isolated conflicts now inspired a galaxy-wide legend of endurance. Humans were no longer seen as a mere species, they were a phenomenon. Their refusal to yield, even against impossible odds, set a precedent that challenged assumptions about survival, strategy, and the very nature of interstellar conflict. In council chambers and command centers across the galaxy, Dominion leaders debated the implications. Some argued for immediate withdrawal from contested systems, fearing that continued engagement would only strengthen human resolve. Others advocated for extreme measures, calculating that the destruction of key human worlds might finally suppress their stubbornness. Yet even the most extreme analyses acknowledged a chilling truth. The humans' greatest weapon was not technology, numbers, or firepower. It was their unyielding will to survive and to fight back, no matter the cost. The human approach was deceptively simple: never surrender, never retreat, and never underestimate the enemy. This stubbornness manifested in small ways: civilians setting traps, engineers repurposing equipment in ingenious ways, soldiers improvising under fire, but collectively, it created a force that was more unpredictable and more resilient than any Dominion algorithm could account for. Where machines, weapons, and conventional tactics failed, human resolve filled the gaps. By this stage in the campaign, the galaxy had begun to recognize that humans were rewriting the rules of engagement. No longer could wars be fought purely with numbers or strategy alone. Against humans, victory required understanding their psychology, predicting their innovations, and, most importantly, respecting their stubbornness as a force to be reckoned with. Dominion fleets, once confident in their supremacy, now approached every battle with caution, aware that humans would exploit even the smallest oversight. Ultimately, the consolidation of human victories was more than a military strategy. It was the embodiment of their defining trait. Every fortified planet, every liberated system, and every victorious skirmish reinforced the truth that stubbornness was not a weakness to be exploited, but a weapon to be wielded. Across the galaxy, allies, neutrals, and enemies alike were forced to acknowledge a reality that humans themselves had long understood. Their refusal to yield was not merely survival, it was power. As human fleets regrouped, civilians rebuilt, and societies adapted, one undeniable fact remained: stubbornness, patience, and relentless determination had transformed humans from a species underestimated into a force that reshaped galactic history. Their enemies learned, often too late, that fighting humans was never simply a matter of firepower or numbers. It was a confrontation with an unstoppable will, a spirit that refused to die, and a determination that no threat, no odds, and no empire could ever fully extinguish. The galaxy was watching, the Dominion was recalculating, and humans were just getting started. The Dominion's frustration had reached a tipping point. For years, they had underestimated humans, dismissed their tactics, and assumed that conventional warfare would eventually crush them. Now, faced with a species that seemed impervious to logic, strategy, and intimidation, they were forced to escalate. Their greatest fleets, the elite of their interstellar military, were dispatched to strike at the heart of human-controlled systems. Entire sectors faced obliteration. Worlds that had barely tasted freedom now trembled under the shadow of annihilation. On the human side, intelligence networks buzzed with alerts and warnings. Satellite reconstructions revealed the staggering scale of the incoming Dominion forces. Some of the human commanders briefly paused, calculating odds that seemed insurmountable. Fleets outnumbered by 10 to 1, orbital defenses vulnerable, ground forces scattered. The raw mathematics of the situation suggested inevitable defeat. Yet in every briefing room, one thing remained constant: humans refused to consider surrender. Their stubbornness was no longer a trait, it was the very core of their strategy. Plans were drawn not to flee, but to adapt. Human engineers modified ships in record time, transforming cargo vessels into battle-ready frigates, outfitting transport shuttles with improvised weapons, and developing shields capable of absorbing more energy than conventional designs allowed. On the ground, civilians became part of the effort, constructing barricades, creating decoys, and establishing hidden supply caches. Every individual, from the youngest trainee to the oldest veteran, understood that survival depended on relentless, unified effort. When the Dominion fleet entered human-controlled space, they were met not with panic but with calculated defiance. Humans employed guerrilla tactics in orbit, drawing the enemy into asteroid fields, magnetic storms, and gravitational anomalies. Smaller squadrons would engage, feint, and then vanish, leaving Dominion commanders scrambling to locate them. The initial clashes resulted in heavy Dominion losses, far greater than anticipated. Analysts back home had warned that human stubbornness could not compensate for disparity in firepower. But here again, humans proved them wrong. On the ground, the battle mirrored the conflict in orbit. The Dominion deployed mechanized infantry and advanced combat units, expecting to crush human settlements quickly. Instead, they encountered resistance that was fluid, unpredictable, and ferocious. Entire towns had been converted into defensive labyrinths. Tunnels, traps, and fortified positions allowed humans to hold key points against overwhelming odds. Dominion soldiers reported encounters with individuals who, despite severe injury, continued to fight, striking back with precision and cunning. The human determination was almost contagious, spreading courage and morale among their ranks. The Dominion commanders, initially confident in a rapid campaign, began to experience doubt. Their simulations, built on standard assumptions of morale and attrition, failed spectacularly. Human adaptability created a constantly shifting battlefield, one where the rules changed faster than they could respond. Entire strategies had to be rewritten on the fly, wasting precious resources and further demoralizing the forces that had expected an easy victory. One pivotal engagement occurred over the planet of Trivara. The Dominion deployed a massive assault fleet, intending to destroy orbital defenses and subjugate the population. Human scouts, however, had anticipated the approach. Using a combination of outdated satellite technology, improvised decoy satellites, and careful coordination with planetary defense grids, humans funneled the fleet into a trap within a dense asteroid belt. Dominion cruisers collided with debris. Missiles misfired due to gravitational interference, and communication arrays were disrupted. Within hours, what had been a seemingly unstoppable armada was reduced to a fragmented, disoriented force. Human pilots, operating under extreme conditions, exploited every opportunity. Using short-range maneuvers, gravity slingshots, and synchronized attacks, they inflicted damage disproportionate to their numbers. Each human unit functioned with the mindset of total commitment. No retreat, no surrender, no hesitation. Casualties were high, yet morale remained unbroken. Every fallen comrade became a symbol of defiance, a testament to the human willingness to fight even when victory seemed impossible. On the ground, civilians played a crucial role. Improvised weaponry, intelligence relays, and strategic sabotage slowed the Dominion advance. Hospitals treated the wounded with whatever supplies were available, and engineers continuously repaired defenses under fire. Even in moments of chaos, humans adapted with speed and ingenuity. Where other species might have crumbled under pressure, humans turned every setback into an advantage. Dominion soldiers began to whisper of the unstoppable human will, noting that their technological superiority was frequently negated by sheer determination and unpredictability. The climax of the Trivara battle was marked by a daring operation led by Captain Arlen Voss, a human veteran renowned for his unyielding tenacity. Voss orchestrated a maneuver that lured the Dominion flagship into a planetary canyon network. Using the terrain to neutralize the flagship's weapons, Voss and his team launched an assault that disabled critical systems, forcing the enemy command to retreat. The victory was a turning point. Not only did it secure Trivara, but it demonstrated to the galaxy that humans could not be crushed, no matter the scale of the threat. In the aftermath, Dominion analysts were forced to revise their understanding of human combat. Reports circulated describing a species that thrived under pressure, leveraged adversity into advantage, and displayed a relentless commitment to survival. The human ability to endure, adapt, and strike unpredictably made them a force unlike any other in galactic history. Stubbornness was no longer a trait. It was a weapon that reshaped entire campaigns and challenged assumptions about warfare itself. As the humans consolidated their defenses, they did not rest. Training intensified, strategies were refined, and technology was adapted for maximum flexibility. Every citizen, every soldier, and every leader understood the stakes. The Dominion would return, but humans had proven they could face even the most formidable enemy without faltering. Their stubbornness had not only saved them, but had transformed into a force multiplier, turning potential annihilation into tactical advantage. The galaxy watched with awe. Allies began to question whether siding with or opposing humans could ever be decided by conventional wisdom. Enemies once confident in their superiority approached human space with caution. Every battle, every campaign, and every demonstration of human resolve contributed to a growing legend that humans, stubborn and unyielding, were capable of shaping the fate of the galaxy through sheer willpower. The lesson was clear: stubbornness was not a weakness. It was not merely perseverance. It was a weapon that could dismantle fleets, disrupt empires, and turn the tide of war in ways that logic and technology alone could never achieve. Humans had proven, again and again, that their refusal to surrender, to retreat, or to accept defeat gave them an edge no species could match. And as the galaxy realized this truth, one fact became undeniable. Underestimating humans was not just a mistake, it was a catastrophe. The galaxy was slowly coming to terms with a harsh reality. Humans could not be broken, coerced, or outmaneuvered in any predictable way. What other species perceived as stubbornness was, in truth, an extraordinary capacity to endure, adapt, and turn every disadvantage into an opportunity. Across dozens of star systems, human colonies had transformed near defeat into legendary victories. Entire fleets that had once been thought invincible were neutralized by human ingenuity and unyielding spirit. Each clash left stories that would echo through generations, inspiring both allies and adversaries alike. In the aftermath of the Trivara battle, human leaders convened to strategize for the inevitable counterattacks. While some systems had been devastated, the human response had been swift, organized, and decisive. Civilian participation was unparalleled. Engineers, medics, pilots, and scientists all contributed to recovery and preparation for the next assault. Unlike other species, humans did not rely solely on superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They relied on one thing that no enemy could ever manufacture or replicate: their collective, unbreakable will. Diplomatic envoys from neighboring civilizations began to arrive cautiously, intrigued and alarmed by reports of human resilience. Many had assumed that humans were fragile, prone to panic, or ultimately compliant under sufficient pressure. They now found a species that defied every expectation. Humans did not seek needless conquest, yet they commanded respect through action alone. Their reputation spread faster than their fleets, an invisible force shaping alliances, deterring aggression, and rewriting the rules of engagement across the galaxy. Meanwhile, the Dominion, the empire that had once believed it could subdue humanity with overwhelming force, was forced to retreat and reconsider its approach. Military strategists pored over battle logs, simulations, and survivor reports, desperately trying to understand a species that refused to conform to logic. They noted patterns in human behavior: audacity in the face of impossible odds, relentless adaptation, and a refusal to accept defeat as a final state. Every attempt to intimidate humans or leverage conventional power had failed. Every calculation based on probability and brute force had been invalidated by a species that turned the concept of warfare on its head. Historians and philosophers began to recognize the deeper significance of their victories. This was not merely survival, it was a testament to the unique qualities that defined humanity itself. Courage, creativity, empathy, and stubbornness coalesced into a form of power unmatched by technology or military might alone. Generations had trained, suffered, and persevered, not for glory or conquest, but because it was in their nature to persist. The galaxy's perception of humans was evolving from a curiosity to a profound, almost existential respect. Some even whispered fear. Across human-controlled territories, celebrations were tempered with pragmatism. Leaders emphasized preparation for the future, understanding that the Dominion and other adversaries would not give up easily. Yet, even in the face of continued threat, morale was at an all-time high. Citizens of every planet, from young cadets to seasoned veterans, felt an unmistakable sense of purpose. They were no longer just survivors. They were the embodiment of a principle that no force could fully comprehend: human stubbornness as a weapon of unimaginable potency. Military academies across human systems adapted their training to formalize what had once been instinctive. Courses now included not only tactics, weapons training and strategy, but lessons in resilience, improvisation, and psychological endurance. Students were taught to embrace adversity, to view impossible odds as opportunities, and to understand that human stubbornness was a tool just as critical as any ship, weapon, or shield. The most distinguished instructors stressed that while technology could fail and numbers could be outmatched, the human spirit remained indomitable. Meanwhile, intelligence networks intercepted whispers from alien leaders, struggling to reconcile the data they were receiving. Rumors of entire campaigns lost to small human forces, planets defended by minimally equipped militias, and fleets turned into instruments of chaos spread like wildfire. The galaxy was learning a lesson that humans had long understood, that true power lay not merely in equipment, strategy, or overwhelming strength, but in an unwavering refusal to surrender. Back on Trivara, Captain Arlen Voss stood atop a hillside overlooking the rebuilt capital, observing citizens working tirelessly to restore the planet. His reflection was shared by countless leaders across human space. Victories were not trophies. They were proof of something far deeper. Humans were by nature adaptable, relentless, and daring. Their stubbornness, once a trait mocked or dismissed, had become their defining strength. A weapon so formidable that even the most powerful empires could not ignore it. Voss's eyes scanned the horizon as young cadets trained in simulated combat scenarios. Each drill, each exercise was not just preparation for future conflicts, it was a living demonstration of human resolve. The Dominion would return, as would other threats lurking in the void. But humans were no longer the species to be underestimated. The galaxy had learned, often at great cost, that when humans fought, they did so with a unity of purpose and a refusal to yield. They were not merely survivors, they were a force capable of shaping the destiny of the stars themselves. In the council halls of the human territories, speeches were delivered that emphasized the lessons learned: unity, courage, and the strategic value of human stubbornness. Leaders reminded citizens that their victories were not granted by luck or circumstance alone. They were earned through relentless effort, creativity, and the unwavering refusal to accept defeat. Each triumph reinforced the message that human stubbornness was not a flaw, but a fundamental weapon, one that would continue to serve them in the battles yet to come. As the galaxy watched, the legend of human stubbornness became undeniable. No empire, fleet, or alliance could ignore the stories of planets saved against impossible odds, fleets neutralized by sheer audacity, and civilizations inspired by the sheer force of human determination. To alien leaders, humans had become a phenomenon, a species that did not calculate only with probability, but with the relentless will to survive and prevail. Even in the darkest hours, humans had shown that surrender was never an option, and retreat was merely a strategic delay, never a resignation. The final lesson of this era was clear. Stubbornness was no longer just a human trait. It was their most effective weapon. Across star systems, every battle, every campaign, and every individual contributed to a legacy that would shape interstellar history. Humans had demonstrated beyond question that the galaxy could not handle a species that refused to bend, refused to yield, and refused to die in the face of overwhelming adversity. In the end, as the stars stretched endlessly across the void, humans continued to advance, rebuild, and defend. Their stubbornness, their defining characteristic, remained unbroken. And the galaxy, whether ally or enemy, understood a singular, inescapable truth. Humans would not be defeated because they refused to be. Where others saw hopelessness, humans saw opportunity. Where others saw inevitable failure, humans saw challenge. Their weapon was simple, yet absolute, their indomitable, unyielding, and unstoppable human will. And so, the universe watched, wary, in awe, and perhaps a little afraid, as humans stood, stubborn and unshakable, ready to face whatever the cosmos dared to throw at them next.